I have a dream, oh, I have a dream. Red, white, and blue, fly free, fly free. I believe, oh, I believe. Will you dream with me?
Good morning, everyone out there. Welcome to Changing Times. It is Wednesday, June the 21st. I think this is the first day of summer, officially the first day of summer. It's going to feel like that here in the Springfield, Missouri area, Southwest Missouri. It's going to be about 88 degrees today and going to get warmer this weekend in the 90s, low 90s. And so welcome to summertime, and it's going to start getting dry, they say. So that's my weather forecast today. I always do that when the weather's kind of nice. If I don't like the weather, I don't say anything about it. But we are live at the Axe Media Group headquarters in Springfield, Missouri. This is show number 114. So we are blessed to have 114 shows. The video that you saw when we first started the show, Don Blackard, our co-host with me, that's not here right now, but hopefully will be back at some point, did that video, and we really are always proud of that. And that's how we start our show and end the show. But I want you all to get out a pencil and paper. Have something to write on. We're going to be giving you some very, very important facts today that may actually enhance your quality of life. I think Marcia and I'm Lynn Morris, and you're Marcia Rauwerdink.
Perfect.
Rauwerdink. And I tell you what, Marcia is a advocate for the Alzheimer's Association, volunteer, and been with them for 16 years. And she knows an awful lot about Alzheimer's and what we're going to do today, because I think this is the disease. My mother died at 94 with Alzheimer's, and more people are being diagnosed with Alzheimer's every day, every month, every year. And so they're estimating that over 3 million people a year are becoming diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so that's a large, kind of scary number. And so what we're going to be talking about today is things that you could see ahead of time, maybe the 10 early warning symptoms, signs that either you or a family member, maybe a neighbor could recognize, and that actually will help your quality of life. You know, we were talking, Marcia and I were talking before the show started that it's not necessarily how long you live. I mean, I think everyone wants to live a long time, but it's not necessarily how long you live, but how you live during those years that God gives you. And quality of life is probably, to me, the most important thing. If you have great quality of life during the time that you're alive, then you've had a successful, happy life. So that's what we're going to talk about. You need to probably write down those 10 signs and just keep those around, because you'll never know when you come in contact with someone. And another thing I just want to point out before we really let Marcia kind of get into this is, you know, it's not just older people. Certainly it's probably one of the reasons that people get diagnosed. As they get older, they have a greater chance to get Alzheimer's. However, I know that people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, I had a very, very good friend that was in his early 50s that was in the radio business. And he started forgetting his appointments with advertisers and things like that, and couldn't remember things, and was rapidly diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and not the early stage, but a middle stage. And so it can happen at any age. And so you need to really listen to what we're doing, because this could really impact your life. But some other things, Marcia, it says that you're a community educator. You know, so you go around and do kind of like what we're doing today, educating people on Alzheimer's.
Correct.
And then you're also a board member of the Greater Missouri chapter.
That's correct.
And so those are all great, important things. I will just say this. I know you've been on our show one other time when Don was here, and you're a difference maker. You're a difference maker, and you are making a difference in people's lives every day when you're going out and representing Alzheimer's and association. And then Don always says you're being the change, and I agree, you're being the change. And so again, that's a powerful person that can do those two things. And so Anyway, so let's kind of go ahead and start. We got the 10 early signs of Alzheimer's.
Correct. And thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
I love doing this because it is very, very important. I want to start by clarifying a couple definitions because lots of people are still confused by two terms. The first one is dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term that covers multiple kinds of dementia. The most common type of dementia is, in fact, Alzheimer's. But dementia is the umbrella term. There are other types of dementias besides Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's is the most common. About 2/3 of cases of dementia are Alzheimer's. The second thing I want to clarify, I want to get rid of a myth. There's still a myth out there that Alzheimer's is a normal result of the aging process. That is absolutely not true. Alzheimer's is actually a disease of the brain. And Lynn already touched on this, but the 10 warning signs, it may not be you, it may not be a family member, it can be someone that you work with. I have a great example of a lovely woman in St. Louis who was a college professor. And as Lynn pointed out about the friend that he had, what ended up happening was she started missing classes. And she started not returning term papers to her class. Her students took it upon themselves to sit down with her and tell her that these things were happening. And the great news about that is she had no idea. And she ended up going to see a physician, did get diagnosed. She ended up having what we call mixed dementia. So she not only had Alzheimer's, but she also had another type of dementia called Lewy body. But what was great about that story was it was her students that informed her. So it can be, and not necessarily a family member that you're watching for these signs for or yourself, but somebody else who really does need the help and doesn't know that they're in the middle of this. So with that, I'm going to launch into the 10 warning signs. Unless you have.
No, I think that's what we need to do. I think this is going to be great information that may make a difference in someone's life, and I think we need to go for that.
All right. So the first one is, what's the first thing that anybody thinks of when they hear Alzheimer's? Memory loss. Memory loss is usually the first thing that people pick up on, and it is memory loss that impacts your daily life. Most commonly, what I hear are people saying to me, I don't understand what's going on. Mom repeats the same question over and over and over again, and the answer is always the same, but I don't understand what's happening. If you do see that happening, that is a warning sign. Now, one of the things that I love about making this presentation is I'm also going to talk about what's a typical sign of aging. So that you can distinguish between what's really a warning sign and what's not, what's a typical sign of aging that you really don't need to worry about. So the opposite of not being able to remember things that have happened in the short term, you can't have, Alzheimer's manifests itself as a loss of recent memory. The typical age-related symptom is you forget a name now and then. You forget a word now and then. That's not a warning sign. You don't need to be concerned about that. It's memory loss that impacts your daily life.
How about, Marcia, if I lose my keys? I can't remember where I put my keys.
We're going to go there.
Okay.
You're a great straight man. We're going to go there. The second one is challenges in planning or solving problems. So, for example, mothers, grandmothers who used to cook all the time and had favorite recipes and could almost do them by heart. If they can no longer follow a favorite recipe, that is a warning sign. In a typical age-related change, however, is in fact, I did this just last week. I was working on my checkbook and I put a deposit in the check column instead of in the deposit column. That's not a warning sign. But if I can no longer follow a favorite recipe, if I can't keep track of monthly bills, that's a big tip off for family members. If you start seeing mail coming in where, you know, your family member is not paying their bills on a regular basis and they always used to, that's a warning sign.
You know, I tell you what, for women, almost all the moms out there are tremendous cooks, and they know how to bake things, make things, and stuff like that. And I remember my mother, before we hired someone to stay with her 8 hours and more hours and more hours until we had to put her in a nursing home just before she died at 94. She couldn't remember even how to make coffee at the end. She was dangerous in the kitchen because she would walk around and stare at the things that she used to use, but she might leave the stove on and just have boiling water or just anything. I mean, she couldn't do a simple thing that she used to just do, and that's a scary thing.
The third warning sign is difficulty completing familiar tasks. What Lynn said sort of just touches on this, but if your family member or a neighbor or a friend suddenly cannot remember how to drive to a very familiar location, a location that they used to go to frequently, if they can no longer assemble a grocery list, remembering the rules, you know, somebody who played Monopoly their whole life and now they can't remember how to play it, that is definitely a warning sign. Now, what's not a warning sign? If I forget whether to hit the power button on the microwave before I hit the timer button or the reverse, that's not a warning sign. That's a typical sign of aging. And in a lot of cases, it's not even a typical sign of aging. I know 30-year-olds who can't do that either.
Sure. Yeah.
The next warning sign is and this gets to personal safety, which is an underlying theme for a lot of these warning signs, is confusion with time or place. People living with Alzheimer's may not be able to tell you what month it is. They may not be able to tell you what year it is. They may not be able to tell you who the president is. That's definitely a warning sign. Sometimes they forget how they got to where they are. That's very scary. And this gets to also the wandering issue, which is if somebody goes to take a walk and now they can't figure out how to get back home, that's definitely a warning sign. Now, what's not a warning sign? What's a typical sign of aging? Once in a while, you get confused. What you get up in the morning and you go, "What day of the week is it?" Now, I don't care anymore because I'm retired. So it doesn't really matter what day of the week it is, as long as I show up on Wednesday morning for Lynn's show. I'm okay.
And you did good, so you didn't forget.
But difficulty in knowing time and place is definitely a warning sign.
You know, Marcia, talking about safety, and I think this is so important that I just using my mom as an example again. Towards the end, before we had to put her in a nursing home, the reason why we put her in a nursing home was because she had to use a walker towards the end of her life because her balance, all of us start to lose our balance and strength of our back and everything and legs when you get older. But she would fall and every once in a while she would cut herself or hurt herself and the ambulance would come and take her to the hospital and then she'd go back home. But she would forget to use the walker. And we'd say, "Mom, you know, that's what we start out with a cane. Then we start out with a walker and then a walker that you could sit down with, you know, it's kind of had a progression, but it's safety because when you start to forget the things that you have to support your walking and you fall and break a hip, then it's pretty much over with. So that's important.
Very important. And along the lines of safety as well, how this gets described, I'll try to do a better job, but trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Now, in a less complicated way, what does that mean? That means that I may be driving and I can't recognize the spatial relationship between my vehicle and another vehicle, or I can't distinguish colors. I can't really understand what those road signs mean anymore. That is very, very, very risky. Now, there are vision changes that are natural with age, like cataracts, for example. That's not a warning sign. But what it is a warning sign if you really cannot place yourself and understand where you are relative to, another vehicle that's very scary, and there's an awful lot of angina, if you will, when it comes to having to deal with, can mom or dad continue to drive? But you also have to keep in mind that it's not just their safety, it's the safety of everybody else on the road around them. And there are far too many fatal accidents every year because someone is driving who really should not be on the road anymore.
That's right.
The next one is new problems with words in speaking or writing. This one strikes me right to the heart. The reason it does is because my mother was a reading specialist. She died of Alzheimer's in 2005. And because she was a reading specialist, she did everything from remedial reading to advanced reading. And she lost her vocabulary. My best example was she was trying to write thank you cards when she was in one of her early facilities, and she could not come up with the words to write the thank you card, and I had to help her come up with the words to do that. That was an absolute killer. But if you know someone who's always been able to carry on a conversation, they've always been able to enjoy having a conversation, and they can no longer carry on a conversation, or if they stop in the middle of a conversation, they can't pick up where the conversation was. They can't pick up that thread anymore, and they don't have the words, cannot come up with the words anymore. So that is a very significant warning sign when people lose their vocabulary. Now, conversely, how many times a week do you forget a word?
Sure.
You can't come up with it in the moment. Sometimes you come up with it 5 minutes later. Sometimes you come up with it 3 hours later. For me, I wake up at 3 a.m. and go, aha, that was the word I was looking for. That's a typical sign of aging. That's not a warning sign. The warning sign is if someone really loses their vocabulary and can no longer carry on a conversation.
Yeah, they're very interesting.
Another warning sign, but this gets at Lynn and his car keys.
Good. I need to hear this.
Is misplacing things and not being able to go back and find them. People with Alzheimer's often put things in very unusual places. You may find their cell phone in the refrigerator. You may find the car keys in a bookshelf somewhere where they would never, ever have put them. And the list obviously goes on and on. The difference with me losing my car keys or Lynn losing his car keys is we usually can retrace our steps. We can go, wait a minute. I got out of the car, I came in, oh, wait a minute, the phone rang. Let me go over by the phone. And, that's probably where my car keys are. But someone with Alzheimer's cannot retrace their steps. They can't remember where they were. And so they can't go back and retrieve that lost object that is often found in a very unusual place where it should not be. So
yeah, I'm not putting up my keys in the refrigerator. And you know what? If I would just, Marcia, if I would just do what Janet, my wife, tells me to do, always leave them in the same place.
Yes.
See, the two things I think most people lose is your cell phone or your keys.
Those are the two.
And honestly, I've always found my cell phone. And the second thing is I've always found my keys. And yes, I do. I mentally rethink where I left them, and I do put them in different places at different times. And if I just would do what my wife says to do, I would be much better off.
Misplacing things from time to time is a normal sign of aging. That's not a warning sign. But not being able to retrace your steps is definitely a warning sign. What happens to me is I'll be in my office at home and I'll get up and go to the kitchen for something. And then I'm standing in the kitchen and I go, what did I come in here for? And so what I do is I go back to my office. As soon as I sit in my chair, I go, now I know what I was going to the kitchen for, and I go to the kitchen. Someone with Alzheimer's cannot do that.
Right. That's a good distinction right there.
The next one, and this gets at financial safety, which is another really critical aspect of understanding and knowing when you're seeing these kinds of signs in someone, which is decreased and poor judgment. These individuals may use poor judgment when they're dealing with money. They may not pay attention to grooming or what they're wearing, etc. But I de-emphasize that. I think the most important aspect of this is that there is, unfortunately, a decreased judgment when it comes to money. And the huge risk here is, and we know this, but because it's Alzheimer's, if we all know how much damage scammers can do to the elderly, but people with Alzheimer's are at an even greater risk than an average elderly person because they are very, very susceptible to someone calling them or texting them or emailing them, and then them making a poor financial decision. And honestly, a lot of people with Alzheimer's get totally wiped out financially because someone has scammed them.
You know, Marcia, that's a good point. Again, using my mom as an example, just recently we've started actually finally getting rid of a lot of the paperwork that my dad and my mom had. And so I just found 3 checks that my mother had written as we're doing a shredding event this week at Fremont Hills. And you can take anything you want to up there and have it shredded. So we've got a lot of old documents and things like this. And I found 3 checks. One was written to the IRS, my mom wrote, and one was for utilities, city utilities in Springfield. And I'm not sure what the third one was right now, but 3 checks. They were all just still in the checkbook. They weren't torn out. So then that made me wonder, well, did she not pay the IRS several years ago? And no, she did. She had already paid them, because they were gone. It was earlier entry. So she did enter them. And it was the exact same amount as the check that. So she must have decided she hadn't paid him and was going to pay him again or something.
Couldn't remember.
So we don't know for sure, but that's just kind of interesting. She was able to do her checkbook, although I noticed that she, towards the end of her life, she was not balancing her checkbook. Okay. And most of us should be balancing our checkbook every week, every month, making sure our balances are correct with the bank and things like that. But she was remarkable as far as her record keeping until maybe the last year of her life.
That's
and
great.
Then we had to take over that. But so that's really good. But financial, that's a real danger and especially with people calling up and stuff like that, trying to take advantage of elderly people, but it could even be a younger person they take advantage of.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
And it very, very often is, but it's unfortunate, that, first of all, it's unfortunate that we have these individuals with no conscience.
Right.
But the fact that someone with Alzheimer's is even more susceptible, and that's how come it's very important especially for family members, to be aware if you're seeing something like this. I do know someone who, an individual befriended a gentleman who had, in fact, we found out later, had Alzheimer's. But this woman befriended him. And what she managed to do was talk him into buying her a new car, talk him out of several of his assets. It was a very, very sad situation. And it took a while for the family to catch up and go, something's really wrong here. Why is he writing a check to someone for $20-some thousand to buy a car? She only had just recently gotten to know him, recognized that she could take advantage of him.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Unfortunately, we do have people like that. Well, it's time, Marcia, to talk about our sponsors. And so be sure and keep that pencil and paper out. You may want to write something down. Our first sponsor is Brad Pistow. He is a certified fiduciary financial planner right in Ozark, Missouri. And his telephone number is 417-581-9222, 9222, 417-581-9222. And you're saying, well, you're in one of the other 49 states, and what does this matter? Well, actually, he's licensed in 3 states, but he travels all over the country. He's a contributor for the USA Today. He does talks all over the country about safe money investments, and he has his first book, Safe Money Matters, was a best-selling Amazon retirement book. His second book that he wrote last December was called Bulletproof. It's also #1 best-selling retirement book. And you can get those free by just calling the 417-581-9222, and they'll give you that book. They'll give you information. If you live in a state where he's not licensed, he'll contact a friend of his, associate, that will help you, and they don't charge you for consultation. And I'm telling you what, right now, Marcia, the stock market was down this morning. I always pay attention. I don't have a lot of stocks anymore. I've sold most of my stocks. But here's the deal. I've never lost a penny, not one penny, whether the stock market goes down 30%, 50%, 10%, whatever. I don't lose any money. Now, when the stock market's going down, I don't make as much money. But how would you like to make 6 or 8% every year consistently, never lose a penny, and get bonuses when you put your money into some of the funds that he has? And so that's why Safe Money Matters is so important. I highly recommend him. I use him. Dawn Blackard, her family uses him. So many of our family, friends, and different people. And he's just one example of, I wouldn't have a sponsor on my show. I have people that want to be sponsors on my show, but you've got to be an independent, family-owned, Christian-driven business to be a sponsor, because I don't want to put my name on anything. So I highly recommend Brad Pistow. He's in Ozark, Missouri. The next sponsor we have, Marcia, is Youngblood Motor Group. They are another family-owned business. They've been in business over 43 years, right in Southwest Missouri, selling cars. And it's John Youngblood and John Whittaker. John Whittaker usually sits right over there next to Marcia there. And he tells us once or twice a year about the car industry. He tells us when to buy, when to lease, when to sell, what types of new cars are coming out, whether it be electric, hybrid, whatever. He told us about a really interesting car, Marcia, that I might be interested in, because I don't want an electric car or have to go find a charging station. I don't want that. But one of the cars he has, and I'm anxious to get him on again this year, is he has a car that's electric and gas, so it's both. But that's what I want. But you drive down the highway, and when the battery gets to about 20%, it just automatically kicks on to gasoline, and now it's going down the road. So you never stop, okay? Now the generator kicks in and recharges the battery. Doesn't take that long, but it's recharging the battery. So now all of a sudden it clicks back to battery, and you're still going down the road. You never have to stop at a charging station. Now, that's the kind I would buy, because I'm too busy. I don't want to be trying to figure out where this charging stations are and things like, and it's too expensive to put one in your garage. I've already checked that out to see what the cost would be, and it's pretty expensive. So honestly, his car was interesting to me. But they also sell a lot of used cars. They're all certified pre-owned cars. That means they've gone through a lot of inspection points and making sure that car is a very good car when you drive it off the lot. So John Youngblood, John Whittaker, their telephone number is 417-882-3833. So 3833, John Youngblood, John Whittaker. So, and I'm going to be, my last 2 cars I bought from them, and I'm going to be buying another car in about a year or so. So that's who I go to. That third sponsor that we have is Louis Michael. He's a sub co-host for us, and he's still not feeling well today. I think he's been sick 3 weeks in a row. So we got to send out some prayers today for him to get well, he and Patty to get well. But he is a tremendous guy. Not only is there a realtor down at the firm, FIRM, down in Ozark, Missouri. That's a boutique, family-owned Parham business that had been in business for a long time down the Ozark, Missouri area. He does more than just selling homes and selling farmlands and things like that. He's an Elvis impersonator. And so what's really cool is, and he sounds just like Elvis. He used to look like Elvis, and he admits when he could fit into the jumpsuits. Most of us can't fit into Elvis jumpsuits as we get older, but he's just a tremendous guy. If you buy a house from him, he'll do an Elvis party in your backyard. You'll get to know all your neighbors. It's just going to be awesome. I've actually got a fundraiser thing for him to help him this summer at a very popular restaurant in Ozark, Missouri, and he's going to do an Elvis concert. He doesn't know this yet, so if he listens in, he'll see that today. But we'll have probably several hundred people down there and raising money because he is the CEO of Choosing to Live. So he's a guy who suffered from depression when he was young and in school and through his school years and things like that, and still today has depression from time to time, just like so many people out there have, and some type of anxiety or something going on, and he wants people to choose life over death. He almost committed suicide himself. And so his phone number, very important, 417-986-1086, 988-1086, 988-1086, the firm, Louis Michael. And hopefully he'll be back next week to help us out. But just a tremendous guy, and we appreciate him as a sponsor. We also appreciate all the things he does to try to keep people alive instead of choosing death by suicide. So that's our sponsors. We still have, in fact, I'm actually stopping by a group that has about 7 or 8 stores, family-owned stores, and so I'm working on another sponsor right now. But if you want to sponsor, just give us a call, and we're here live at Axe Media Group headquarters in Springfield, Missouri, and you can get a hold of us. So, Marcia, okay, what number are we on?
We're doing really well. We're up to number 9.
Number 9, okay.
Number 9, and this is also very important because it can be very easy to spot, even if you miss some of the other warning signs. If someone withdraws from social activities that they once were very active in, they pull away from hobbies that they used to love doing, any kind of withdrawal from some kind of social activity is definitely a warning sign. What happens is with this disease, because they start to experience language difficulties, they have trouble carrying on conversations. When it comes to these social activities, they start to become uncomfortable and they will pull back. And that's definitely a warning sign, especially when you know someone who's always routinely been very active in something. I'm going to use my mother as an example. She had been for a long time a member of the senior choir of our church, and she was also the choir librarian. And I was talking to her on the phone one day, and she told me that she had quit being choir librarian, and she was also quitting the senior choir. And I went, why? And she would not answer my question. That was a huge warning sign. I already knew that we were in this Alzheimer's space, but when she quit the choir and quit being choir librarian. She completely withdrew from that kind of activity. And so that's a warning sign that can be maybe even earlier than even picking up on memory loss when they pull back. Now, what's a typical sign of aging? I may just want to be by myself this weekend. I may be tired of having too much family around. I may be tired of what I was working on. I may be halfway through knitting an Afghan and go, I just need to move on to something else. That's not a warning sign. That's just a typical sign of aging. Nothing to be concerned
Well,
about.
Marcia, that's a good point because, when I was younger and not too that many years ago, I didn't mind crowds, thousands of people like the Sertoma duck race down in Ozark over the weekend. Probably Saturday night, they had probably about 15,000 people there. I used to, as a campaigner over all these years as state rep and school board and now county commissioner, I wanted to go into those crowds. I loved it. I loved the people. But, the other night I chose to do something with my family instead of going for the first time in probably 10 or 11 years. I missed the Sertoma duck race. I did buy $100 worth of ducks and for 11 years in a row, none of my ducks know how to swim. So I haven't won anything yet. I keep telling Commissioner Jackson, he runs the Sertoma duck race. And I said, man, I've spent a lot of money over all these years, always $100 every year to buy these ducks, and they don't know how to swim. But we decided, no, let's not go down there and bring our lawn chairs with all the crowd, the parking situation and everything. Let's just spend time with our family. And so we did, and it was a wonderful evening just with our family. But that's not really a sign.
No.
That's actually, it's just as we get older, you just don't want to try to figure out how I'm going to take my lawn chair from my parking spot to and everything like that. So that's interesting.
And it's like I said, it can be a very easy one to pick up on,
Mm-hmm.
especially if someone just stops doing a hobby that they were doing for years.
Right.
Especially if it's a social activity hobby with other people.
Sure.
It's easy to pick up on. And number 10, and people who have been through this journey like I have definitely see this. And this is changes in mood, personality, and behavior. So this is where people talk about, gee, mom or dad was such a kind, quiet person. People loved being around them. But what happens with Alzheimer's is there are behavioral changes. People may become depressed. They may become anxious over situations that they were never anxious about before. One of the biggest dangers or troubles is paranoia creeps in, and all of these behavioral changes are related, but they may become much more upset with family members. You get into a family situation and they lose their temper in a heartbeat when they never would have lost their temper before. So those are personality changes that definitely happen. In my case, my mother had a gentleman from our church who always serviced her water softener. And he came to service her water softener. She let him in the house. He went down to the basement. He's done. He comes up out of the basement. My mother confronts him and accuses him of breaking into her house, doesn't know who he is, and accuses him of stealing. Mm-hmm. So there's your window of, she knew who he was. She let him in the house to service the water softener. And by the time he was finished, she didn't know who he was. And she became extremely paranoid that he had broken in and was stealing from her. So those kinds of changes can turn on and off like a light switch.
That's interesting, Marcia. I saw that with my mother too, because we had different caregivers, to begin with. We actually first started out with 4 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, until finally first 3 days a week, 5 days a week, 7 days a week, and then on to the nursing home. And there was one young lady that very good. She was in fact, every caregiver was really good with my mom. But as my mom started putting things like and forgetting where they were, she accused this young lady of stealing. Okay. And she didn't want that lady back in her house. She had got this in her mind. I don't want her in my house because I saw these and now she left and I can't and I can't remember what it was now. And so, that was a problem.
Yeah. So, and those changes, especially for close family members or maybe a neighbor who's a very close friend, those changes can be picked up on pretty fast.
Right.
But it's definitely a warning sign to go get it checked out, see if in fact a physician does give you a diagnosis.
Yeah, very good. I want to make one point, and we got one more to go.
Nope, that was it. Number 10.
So here's and then we got some important events coming up we're going to talk about. But one of the things I want people to know out there is a lot of people as they get older, they don't have a lot of family members living by them. Okay, their sons and daughters may live someplace else, and so I'm encouraging neighbors, people next door to an older person, be sure and get to know that older person. Check on them on a regular basis. You may be the one that helps diagnose and detect something that's going on with that person that could be either pre-Alzheimer's or Alzheimer's, and you could affect their quality of life. You could really make a difference. You could be a difference maker too. So you could be down the road, a door or two from that person, and just check on them on a regular basis. Then you'll start seeing progress if there's a progression of a disease state, right?
Correct.
And so I think that's really important, and for the family members who live nearby, constantly be listening and watching and looking for those symptoms, those 10 signs that Marcia has talked about today, because that's really important too. But we got some events coming up. So Marcia got one this Saturday, June 24th.
June 24th, we are going to have, we're calling it Chalk for the Walk. It's sort of a pre-walk fundraiser, pre-walk awareness for people to come to the Commercial Street Market. We are going to have a booth there. We're also going to have passports for people to go to 8 or 10 local businesses that are supporting us, and we'll enable you to give you the information that you need in order to sign up a team for the Walk to End Alzheimer's, which is actually happening on another Saturday in September 23rd. We're going to try to get about 1,200 people to the walk this year. We would love to exceed that number, but if we can get there, those are, now I'm talking sort of pre-COVID numbers, but we hopefully will blow by the 1,000.
I think you can do that.
Mark.
Is that going to be the same place as it always is?
Jordan Valley Park.
I participated in that before, and the one this week is on Commercial Street.
Street.
Southwest Missouri. If you live in Southwest Missouri, they've got a pre-walk this Saturday,
Correct.
June the 24th. At what time?
We're going to have the booth from 9 to 12.
9 to 12. You can get educational materials, and I imagine you have a few snacks or something.
And we'll have giveaways.
Giveaways. So that's always fun. Bring your kids. Everyone go over there and do some chalk on the road and do a little pre-walk. And then June, would you say June to... No, September
23rd.
September 23rd. September 23rd. That's going to be a very important day, the large fundraiser walk for Alzheimer's. Well, we're going to run out of time. I want to have you come back again before the end of this year. I want to talk about drugs, medications, treatments, stages of Alzheimer's. We need to continue to talk about this. There is no cure, but there are things that you can do to enhance your quality of life.
Correct.
Thank you for watching today. We'll be back next Wednesday. We have a tremendous guest again next week, Alex Bryant. I'm not going to say anything else other than he ran for U.S. Congress. He's a great young man, and you'll like what he says. See you guys next week.
Thank you.